Hi, and welcome. You're listening to the X22 Report. My name is Dave, and this is episode 648. And today's date is April 22nd, 2015. And the title of this episode is U.S. Government Switches to Phase 2, Operation Restore Puppet Government in Yemen. Let's get right into the economic collapse news. Now, we understand that Greece has many payments coming due, and they're scrounging around for cash to make these payments. We also understand that the Eurozone, it seems like they're getting prepared for Greece to exit the Eurozone and pivot towards Russia. And we see Europe, as we reported yesterday, was maybe going to file an antitrust charge against Gazprom. And guess what? They did it formally today. They filed the antitrust charges against Gazprom. The Gazprom investigation, which began around 2.5 years ago, had been moving toward a settlement. Then all of a sudden we had the Ukraine situation. Everything stalled, and here we are today. And we can see the reason why they're bringing this up at this point in time is because Gazprom is making a deal with Greece to build that pipeline, and they do not want this whatsoever. And here's the official statement from the European Commission. Commission sends statement of objections to Gazprom for alleged abuse of dominance on Central and Eastern European gas supply markets. Ukraine is joining in on this. The Ukrainian government has turned to the country's competition watchdog to start an antitrust probe against Russia's giant Gazprom. And this is coming from Yatsenyuk. And we can see they're all jumping on the bandwagon, going after Russia because of what is happening. Of course, Ukraine doesn't want to pay their bill, which they owe to Gazprom. And the Eurozone right now is looking at the situation and saying, well, we don't want this to happen. We need to file this to see if we can slow this down. And we can see at this point in time that Greece really has no way out of this. And we see the ECB right now is preparing to sacrifice Greek banks with a 50% collateral haircut. With the value of the collateral being reduced so significantly, banks will be hard-pressed to obtain the money they need to survive. Greece's largest banks have been forced to borrow short-term at higher interest money from their central bank. The banks, in turn, have to provide adequate collateral to obtain these loans, which now stand at 74 billion euros. But as we know, the people inside Greece, they're taking their money out of the banks. They're fleeing the system because they know what's coming. They've seen it before with Cyprus, where all of a sudden the banks go on bank holidays and they implement bail-ins. And we can see that Greece is going down that path. And the people in Greece might be Cyprus. And this might be coming very soon. Now, if they don't get help from Russia, if they do not get or make a deal with the ECB, we can see this scenario playing out, where there's another bail-in. The people are locked out of their accounts. And we have to remember, back when this happened to Cyprus, this went on for over a year, where people could only take out a certain number of dollars every single month. Actually, it's not dollars, it's their currency. And they couldn't transfer the money outside of the bank. And these capital controls stayed in effect for over a year. And you have to remember, they went to sleep on a Friday and they woke up Saturday to a bank holiday. This is how quickly it happens. We see in the Eurozone, they're continually telling us that, yes, everything's improving, everything's getting better. And really, it isn't. We see the Eurozone consumer confidence fell by negative 4.6 in April. Of course, the expectations were supposed to be much, much higher because they're trying to convince the people that things are getting better there. But when we look at all the different nations in the Eurozone, we see a lot of them are in a depression. A lot of them are in a deep recession, and we see countries like Germany, UK, they're teetering on a recession. Of course, everyone's trying to convince us that everything is fine, but we can see the indicators, and they're showing up and flashing a red signal at this time. Here in the United States, we're seeing flashing red signals all over the place. I mean, look at Caterpillar. Caterpillar right now has reported an unprecedented 28 months of declining global retail sales. Now, if everything is fine and everyone's in a recovery and everyone is doing well, why are we seeing this? The month of March is seeing a 16% year-over-year collapse in China, after a 20% plunge in 2014 and a 24% plunge the year before. In Latin America, they're seeing a 34% plunge. And basically what we're seeing right now, during the recession from 2008, they had 19 months of consecutive declines. You know what we're seeing right now? This is the 28th month of declines. Much, much worse than from 2008 to 2010. Because what we're seeing right now, from about 2012 going to 2015, it's 28 months of negative sales. And this is after they laid off 40,000 people, bought back their stocks. Basically, the world is collapsing. Companies, their revenues are declining. They're laying off people. We see Tiger Direct. They're closing 31 of their 34 stores nationwide. And they're saying, well, we're just going to go online right now. Forget the stores. And this is what a lot of companies are doing. They're getting rid of the brick and mortar stores, getting rid of the employees, and saying we're going to try to make it with online sales. And this is a recipe for disaster. Of course, everyone thinks online sales is the way everything is going. But I hate to say it, a lot of people still like going in and getting what they want on the same day. They don't want to wait 5-6 days. They don't want to pay for shipping. And right now we see a lot of these companies, they're closing down and people are being laid off. And you know, once they lay off all these employees, they're not going to hire them back on the online sale area. Now these people will be out looking for more work. We understand those students coming out of college. They cannot find work. They're coming out with a huge amount of debt. We understand that the delinquencies are continually rising. And there was an initial report that I did that the delinquency rate was about 18%. But when we look at this and we see what has been going on here, we see that the delinquency rate among students right now on their student loans is more like 30%. And the St. Louis Fed is out there saying that the trend of students who are delinquent on their loans is increasing and it is getting out of hand. Basically what the Fed is saying is delinquency rates are on the rise and the percentage of delinquent borrowers who have simply stopped making payments, late or not, is rising every single day. And it's getting worse. And this is why the White House wants to basically write off this debt. They want to make it possible where these people can go bankrupt so the American people can bail out the entire system. And you have to remember, Moody's is about to downgrade the student loan debt. Just like they did with the subprime securities. They were at AAA, and then all of a sudden they started lowering them. People started to bail. We're seeing the same thing occur once again. Now, all over the corporate media today, they're telling everyone how great home sales are. Everything is bouncing up. This is the best in 18 months. It's incredible. March existing home sales surged 6.1%, the highest since 2013. But when we look around and we look at lumber sales, we look at mortgage applications, basically bottom feeding, bouncing up and down. And when we actually look at the graphs, and we actually look at where we are today, we're not seeing an improvement. Existing home sales right now is basically in a dead cat bounce. We are at 1998 levels. If we look at new home sales, we are at 1968 levels at this point. And if you look, I put the graph on the YouTube video and on the X22Report.com site, you can see each time we had this, we are in a recession. If we are this low in sales with new homes and existing homes, we are right now in a recession. But of course, the corporate media, the government, the central bankers are trying to convince us that everything is fine in the real estate market, and it isn't. And what we're seeing is still cash sales are making up around 23%. Investor sales are making up around 14%, and first-time buyers is around 30%, and then of course we have other sales going down the line. And what this tells us, and we have to remember, Freddie and Fannie implemented a new program. 3% down. They will give loans to subprime people, and many other banks are now joining in saying 0% down, we'll pay for the closing costs, and you can be a subprime borrower. We saw this occur back in 2006, 2007, moving into 2008. And guess what happened? All of those people left their homes and they were foreclosed upon. We are going to see the same exact thing because they want everybody in to pump up this market. And I looked around the country once again, and even in my neighborhood, I am seeing people who put their houses up for sale. They are still on the market 4 months later. Nothing is happening. And I'm seeing people around the country reducing their prices. Now, you have to remember, we're coming into the hot season. And when we talked about real estate, we said we're going to see a bump up. Well, the bump up is coming. We're in the spring. That bad weather is all over with now. And the programs have been implemented. And then once we get through this little bump up, which we saw pretty much what we saw last year, we're going to see a complete decline once again, and it's going to go further down. We see manufacturing still having a problem. The Baltic Dry Index is still at 600 points. Basically, it was brought up because of capsize rates and larger vessel rates. If we go back in time, last year, the Baltic Dry Index was very close to 1,000 points. We are way off, and the Baltic Dry Index is raw material. This is the raw material that factories use, factories produce, because people are going out and purchasing goods. If people are not purchasing goods, the factories don't have to produce, and they don't have to order the raw materials. Now, a central bank governor, Agustin Carstens, governor of the Bank of Mexico and chairman of the IMF International Monetary Fund and Financial Committee, is an absolute insider in international finance and central banking. He unleashed some stark warnings about how all of this might turn out. And he's saying what worries him the most about this global recovery is that it is still depends heavily on QE and interest rate repression. But these policies are not sustainable over the medium or long term. The policies were supposed to promote growth by enticing more risk, taking by basically the idea of this whole entire thing was that consumers would respond to QE. The lower interest rates, and they hoped that the consumers would go out because of lower interest rates and QE, and they would purchase more goods. He's saying this is not happening. He was hoping that the companies from QE and from their policies would respond with real risk, with higher corporate investment. None of these two things has happened. Consumers are struggling, and corporate investment actually went the opposite way. It fell. And then he completely veered off the central banker script. He's saying that financial risk-taking has overwhelmed real risk-taking. Valuations are very rich, he said, and there's the illusion of liquidity in many products. So when the money evaporates, all heck is going to break loose. We are seeing major problems here. They thought by lowering the interest rate, they thought by pushing and creating more money and pumping up the stock market, the consumers were going to believe that we are in a recovery and they were just going to go spend money that they didn't have. Well, guess what? The opposite is happening. We see retail stores closing. We see people getting laid off. This system is kept up by an illusion. We see the Russian anti-drug chief. He's saying the U.S. dollar is basically being propped up by narco dollars. Well, you heard of the petrodollar, where they sell the oil using the dollar. The Russian anti-drug chief is saying, well, the U.S. dollar now is increasingly being linked to drugs. The U.S. national currency is being increasingly linked to the so-called narco dollar, or money obtained through illegal drug trafficking, undermining the global economy. And this is coming from the Russian Federal Drug Control Service chief, Viktor Ivanov. Unfortunately, the U.S. dollar has been increasingly associated with narco dollars, implying the close link between global financial flows and narco money that is consistently being injected into the legal banking network in order to make up for critical liquidity shortages, which is destabilizing the global financial situation. You heard all these banks of all this money laundering? Well, it seems that this might be linked to it, where they're trying to prop up the system with all the drug money. And we know the CIA, the government, deals in drugs. They sell this out to other countries to pay for their covert operations. We know the poppy fields in Afghanistan. They create opium. They sell it around the world, and they protect these fields. Actually, the fields have actually tripled since the United States have been there. And we can see right now, all of this is being kept together by glue and tape. And if one little thing, one black swan event occurs, the entire system just completely falls apart. That's how fragile it is. Putin right now is urging the Russian market to quickly ramp up the domestic food situation because of all the sanctions and the ban on food coming in from the U.S., Europe. They're looking to make deals around the world with the BRIC nations, and he wants to basically go inside the country, and he wants to fill the markets with products of our own domestic producers. And he said it should be done quickly in order to ease the pressure on food markets, decrease the prices, and so on. They're detaching themselves from the private Western central bank countries. They want to be independent. They want to be self-sustaining. And we see China's doing the same, Russia's doing the same, and many other nations are doing the same. Because they realize once this war starts, this is exactly what they're going to need to do. Now, we understand that China is continually purchasing gold. But what's happening is nobody really knows how much gold they have. I mean, back in April of 2009, they said that their gold holdings were around 1,054 metric tons. And we're seeing that Bloomberg Intelligence right now is saying since that period, their gold holdings might be 3 times as much right now, about 3,500 metric tons. And if that is the case, China would therefore have the 3rd largest gold reserve in the world, second only to the U.S. and Germany. But with the U.S., we have to remember, we really don't know how much the U.S. actually has in gold deposits, because the Fed refuses to have it audited. And we have to understand that Germany is having difficulty repatriating much of its gold stored at the Federal Reserve. So this tells us that the U.S. might not even have as much gold as everyone thinks. And actually, China might be the leader in gold. And we can see at this point, without a proper audit of the Fed, we really don't know how much gold there really is. There's a lot of people out there saying all the gold is completely gone. And the Fed, if you really think about it, what would be the reasons for them in stopping an audit of the gold? Basically, I can only think of one. Actually, maybe two, which are they're almost the same. The gold is completely gone, or they might have half or a quarter of it. And they don't want to shock the system, because that's exactly what will happen. And probably that gold that they still have left, which is probably a very small portion of it, is probably leased out many, many, many times. Now, John Kerry was out there and he was giving a speech, and he's saying that countries are far more likely to advance economically and socially when citizens have faith in their governments and are able to rely on them for justice and equal treatment under the law. And this is coming from Secretary of State John Kerry. Kerry talked about America's work with other countries, in Central and South America, in the Middle East, in Ukraine, helping them with the human rights and the rule of law. And when we look at this, look what he's actually saying, and look at not what he's saying, but look at the actions of the United States government central bankers here in the U.S. and in all the other countries. Because what he's saying, and of course this is all lip service, it matters because young people who have opportunities at home will stay and contribute to their societies instead of leaving in search of better luck elsewhere. It matters because freedom of thought and expression are the keys to innovation, which is how whole new industries begin. In the United States, trust in government has now, guess what, has now hit a new low. A new Pew Research Center poll shows that only 23% of Americans right now actually trust the federal government. He's not even in tune with the United States people whatsoever. He's just talking. That's all he's doing. Look at all the different countries that the United States basically took over and put in a puppet government. Do the people really have free expression, the freedom, democracy, or are they treated as terrorists? And are they forced to come under control of the new puppet government? I mean, look at here in the United States. What do we see? The government trying to take away the rights of the people. The First Amendment. They have cages set up, and they tell you this is where you can speak freely. Well, I hate to say it, but the First Amendment, it's not bound by any area. You can speak freely anywhere. They have trolls monitoring the internet, trying to change the story of the free-thinking people. They're trying to get rid of the weapons from the people by infringing on the Second Amendment. They are searching the people here in the United States, violating the Fourth Amendment. We see that 75% of Americans right now see the government officials as corrupt. He is completely not in tune whatsoever. This is what we call lip service. When we look at the real actions of our government so-called leaders, I don't even want to call them leaders, we can see that they're not leaders, they're not in tune, they're not working for the people, they don't go out to see the people, they just go around talking about things to make it look good, to make people think that everything is great, to think that the United States cares about freedom and democracy, but the government officials, if they could, with a snap of a finger, they would get rid of the Constitution and the rights of the people, just like they've done in every single country. We see Obama. He is now going to back the cyber legislation in Congress. Now, he told us, if you remember back in April of 2012, that he would veto any cybersecurity legislation. And I've said in many, many reports, why did he create the executive orders that supports cybersecurity legislation? It makes no sense that he would do this. And why would he create his own cyber legislation? And now he's saying that, yes, he has some reservations. But guess what? He will go ahead and approve it. basically doing the opposite of what he said. And guess what's changed in the cyber legislation? Nothing. Nothing at all. And back in April of 2012, he said, he was going to veto it because of the privacy concerns. Well, nothing's changed. They're still going to give over all your information that's private to a company to the federal government. And the companies will be completely immune. So what really has changed? Absolutely nothing. And we knew he was going to approve this from the very start. We see the TSA, a former TSA screener, Jason Edward Harrington, said that what most people don't realize is that the full body scanners that scans millions of Americans each day are practically useless. The TSA, in its rush to replace the controversial nude radiation scanners that they phased out in 2013, swapped out one poorly functioning line of machines for another. And it does absolutely nothing. The current millimeter wave scanners, with their outrageous false positive rates, regularly cause unnecessary pat-downs of people. The agent running his or her hands over you after you pass through the scanner is almost never doing it for a good reason. And we know this because what he said is most of them, if they see an attractive woman or anything like that, they just want to pat them down. According to an expose on ProPublica, current scanners often qualify even perspiration as a threat. So if you are sweating, guess what? They're going to have to pat you down because you could be carrying a weapon. And we know all of this was put into place for what reason? To control the people. To make everyone think there are terrorists out there. But what we know is that the terrorist is the federal government. The CIA, Mossad, UK. They're the ones who are creating all of this to scare the people into doing what they want. That's it. If you noticed, DHS, FBI, TSA, CIA, NSA have never caught a real terrorist. They haven't stopped anything. They haven't done a thing. Nothing. Zero. Because all of this has been made up to make each person conform so they can control you. That is it. I mean, look at France right now. They had that terrorist act in France, which we know which was a complete false flag. We saw many videos. There's no blood. Everything was acted out. I mean, the person that was in one of the stores was running out with his hands handcuffed. The door opened very slowly. The SWAT team that was there in France was just firing with SWAT members in front of them. It was all made up. And guess what? France right now is still on high security alert 3 months later. This enabled all these countries to pass draconian laws, to take away the people's rights, to block websites, and to keep the armed forces on the ground, getting ready for a collapse. That's what this was all about. This was what was happening in Canada, Australia, France, Belgium, UK, because they understand they're going to need to control the people. They know what's coming. They understand this system can't stay alive. The debt is way too high. The revenue is not there from the people. Most of the people do not have work. They looked around for tax revenue. They can't find it. So they have to keep borrowing from the central bank. We're reaching a point where the whole thing cannot be sustained. We see it in Greece. We see it in Cyprus, Italy. The leaders are saying we just can't maintain this. And eventually this will flow into other countries and the whole entire system will come crumbling down. But again, they don't want to be blamed for this. They want to blame another country. They want to get into war to say, they are the cause, because they are ready and waiting to start this whole system all over again. They know it's at its end. They know they have to restart it. And they're just setting everything up. They've been setting it up for quite a while. And they just have to make sure all the pieces are in place. Does everything always go perfectly for them? No, it doesn't. They thought they were going to get this kicked off way back when Wesley Clark came out and said they were going to get into Iran by 2008. Well, now it's 2015. Back in 2013, they thought they were going to get into Syria. That didn't happen. And here we are today. It's getting later and later in the game. And they're still trying to push this and blame it on another group, another country. And they're doing whatever they possibly can. We see Russia is going to plan to build a nuclear power plant in Argentina. And basically, Russia's nuclear fuel manufacturer said Wednesday it will supply nuclear fuel to scientific and power generating reactors in Argentina. Again, Russia is out there working with the Latin American countries, making economic deals, and we can see that they are now pivoting towards China, towards Russia, towards the BRICS system, and waving goodbye to the United States. That's basically what's happening right now. We see Russia is ready to hold bilateral talks with North Korea, Kim Jong-un, and they're ready to go and make economic deals with North Korea. John Kerry is out there. He is saying, well, you know something? We might be willing to work with Venezuela in order to address problems and improve relations. He also added that he's keen to find areas of common ground. Now, why is the United States government central bankers willing to work with Venezuela at this point? I mean, they placed sanctions on Venezuela. They said they were a national security threat, but what are the Latin American countries doing? They're pivoting away from the U.S. and they're looking towards Russia, China, the BRICS system, the AIIB. And now the United States is saying, well, wait a minute, no, we can't let this happen. We need to take over Venezuela. They tried a uprising in that country. It didn't work out. Maduro squashed that. Because you have to remember, Venezuela has a lot of oil. They need to get in there. They want to put Venezuela on the dollar to prop the system up. And now they're getting nervous because a lot of these countries are moving away from the U.S. and not looking back. Now, out in Ukraine, we see that the situation is not getting better. The economy is collapsing. We see U.S., Poland, U.K., other nations helping out, advising the National Guard there, advising the military personnel in Ukraine, training them, getting ready for a major offensive. And during this time, Ukraine has not paid the people in the southeastern region their pensions. And Yatsenyuk was out there saying that Kiev allegedly continued to pay pensions to Donbass residents in spite of not receiving taxes. And the people of the Donbass region are saying Yatsenyuk's statement is a lie. We have not received anything in 10 months. The last payment that was made was back in December of 2014. And they owe billions to the pensioners in this region. So they haven't been receiving any money whatsoever. We see the French president, Hollande, is saying, you know something, at this point in time, we know Poroshenko wants this, but we don't see the deployment of peacekeepers as necessary at this point. And we know why he wants the peacekeepers, because you have to remember he introduced a bill for martial law in the southeastern regions. He wants peacekeepers in there so he can implement martial law. But according to the Minsk II agreements, this is not going to happen. The OSCE right now, the OSCE is reporting fighting has intensified around Donetsk Airport and Shirokino. And we can see right now they updated their website on April 20th, and they're saying that there's sporadic fighting throughout the day in Shirokino, with hostilities intensifying by the evening. They observed a general engagement of the western side of the village, including tank fire, mortar shelling, small arms, and machine gun, and it has not stopped, even though we have a ceasefire agreement. Poroshenko is still in Europe looking to purchase weapons. France regrets that Kiev is still seeking to buy European weapons while embroiled in an armed conflict with independent supporters in the country's southeast. They're saying that the Minsk II agreement is being applied. Why is Poroshenko out there looking for more weapons? Why is the U.S., the U.K., Poland, and other nations bringing in military soldiers, assets, when the Minsk II agreement says no foreign troops on the ground in Ukraine? And we've seen this before, where the United States has training, drills in a country, and when it is over, what do? They leave the military assets in the country. Well, guess what? We are seeing the same exact thing. The military equipment, which has been brought by the U.S. military personnel for international exercises in the Lviv region, will be given to the Ukrainian military. We saw this back in July or June of 2013 when there was a drill going on in Jordan and the U.S. brought the military assets to that region, and then all of a sudden, a month and a half later, we had that sarin false flag attack in Syria, and all the equipment was there ready to go. We're seeing the same thing occur now. The training has occurred. The weapons, the military assets will be left behind. And guess what? We will see an offensive coming up very soon. We see that a Ukrainian official, Cherchenovs, basically he said the following. He told reporters on April 9th, the Ukrainian authorities were allegedly bracing themselves for implementation of a number of unspecified confidential nuclear programs to create either nuclear weapons or a dirty bomb, which is basically a device that is hooked to conventional explosives with nuclear material, and they explode it, and radiation is supposed to fly all over the place. And again, this is not really proven. We've never really seen it live, so we don't really know if it really works. But again, they put this out there, and we can see that they might be planning something, because the DPR Defense Ministry has said that they're expecting something might happen on May 9th. Some type of provocation from Kiev, because you have to remember, they're having Victory Day. This is the 70th anniversary during that time, and they are saying they're getting intelligence reports that there could be agent provocateurs that might cause something to happen on May 9th. Russia is out there saying that the United States is breaching the NPT by deploying nuclear arms in European countries. He's saying the United States is breaching the Non-Proliferation Treaty by placing its tactical nuclear weapons in the territories of 5 European countries, and this is coming from Minister Sergei Lavrov. And again, we understand that as of right now, the number of U.S. tactical nuclear weapons deployed in Belgium, Italy, Turkey, Germany, and the Netherlands is really unknown, but the Center for Arms Control and Non-Proliferation Research Group estimates there's about 500 warheads deployed in those countries. Obama was out there saying that we understand that Iran is getting the S-300 air defense system, but that doesn't matter. If we needed to, we could still go into Iran and we can deal with the S-300 air defense system. They could penetrate it, they can get in there. So what are they really planning to do here? Because in one side of their mouth, they're talking about the P5+1 talks. The other side, they're talking about hitting Iran. There's no common theme anymore with the United States government. They're all over the place. They're trying to push this agenda and get into Iran, place their oil on the dollar. And if that can't happen, they're just going into Iran, because you have to remember, the last 2 countries they need to get into is Syria and Iran. And of course now they're having problems with the other Middle Eastern countries, but hey, doesn't matter. They'll just go back into all of these countries and restore the puppet governments. Because that's exactly what they'll end up doing. And of course, this will set off World War III. Russia is still continually flying into Yemen, evacuating more and more people, while the United States is sitting on the sidelines and said, hey, U.S. citizens, you're on your own. So Russia came in and evacuated U.S. citizens with other nationals from different countries. It's amazing how the U.S. doesn't even care about their people. You know what they're worried about? Restoring the puppet government in Yemen. We understand the United States has warships. And of course, yesterday we talked about them coming and stopping the arms from being delivered to the Houthis. So they're going to stop the Iranian ships. And we know for a fact Iran is not going to bring arms on their warships into Yemen with the U.S. right there. It makes no sense. This is made up propaganda to convince everyone that Iran is part of what is going on here. I mean, the U.S. was completely embarrassed last week after one of its ships taking part in the blockade boarded a Panamanian cargo ship because they said there was weapons in there for the Houthis. Guess what they found? Absolutely nothing. They're just going ahead and boarding these different ships, trying to find these weapons someplace. The Saudi prince tweeted the following: any fighter pilot who took part in the Yemen bombing campaign and hit civilians will get a Bentley. And then he quickly deleted it. So basically you can see their objective is to punish the people in Yemen for kicking out the puppet government. That's it. Right now, Iran, the Yemeni people, the UN, they're all calling for peace, a ceasefire. We see the Houthis right now are still being bombarded by airstrikes. Even though they told us decisive storm has stopped, they're still bombing. And basically what's happening right now, the Houthis are saying, listen, if you want to talk and you want to talk peace, you need to stop the bombing in this country, and then we can resume our talks of peace. And the Houthis know basically what the United States government central bankers want. They want the government restored to the puppet government. The end. That's it. And of course, they're going to use double talk. Of course, they're going to try to convince them that things are different this time. It will be better. You can work together as a dual government, but you know this is not going to work out. The Houthis know how the Americans work. Well, I shouldn't say the Americans. The U.S. government works. The central bankers work. They tell them whatever they want to hear, and then all of a sudden, we have the same problem over and over and over again. And of course, we can see right now that the U.S. has deployed 12 warships to the Gulf of Aden. They're bringing in more and more warships to this area. And of course, as we know, the Saudi government, the U.S., they're saying, it's a victory. We set out to what we needed to do in Yemen. We bombed the people. We bombed their infrastructure. And now they're going to give up. And now we're going to start Operation Renewal of Hope, which is really Operation Restore the Puppet Government. That's really what it is. And it means that they're getting ready to go in with some type of land invasion. Basically, they're just rebranding it right now because the Saudis wouldn't allow humanitarian aid in, or they let it trickle in a little bit. The people are suffering. They have a naval blockade, so supplies cannot come in to the ports of Yemen. And right now the world is looking at this, and all they're seeing is bombing of the people of Yemen. And Yemen didn't attack anyone. Saudi Arabia is the aggressor. And if we really think about this and we turn the situation around, think about this for a second. The way it would look if we changed the news stories, and what you think the U.S. government and the rest of the world would think if we changed it to this. The Russian government started bombing Yemen. The Russian government decided to fly into Syria and bomb that country. The Russian government decided to go into Iraq, decided to go into Libya, Lebanon, to restore a new government in these countries. What would the United States be doing at this point? They would be saying that Russia is invading these countries, it's completely against international law, and they are the aggressors. But here, we see the United States going into countries, sovereign countries, and just invading whenever they want. And they're using the Islamic State to do this, to convince everyone this is why we need to go into these countries. What is the reason for Saudi Arabia to go into Yemen? They don't have one. And we know it's the United States. It's really the United States' war in Yemen. They're losing control of the Middle East. This is the problem, because once these countries start selling the oil, not using the dollar, this will make the entire system completely collapse. And this is what they're afraid of, because they see what's going on. And this has taken longer than they thought it was going to take. And they're getting nervous. And they need to blame another country or group. And this is why they're ramping everything up right now. Listen, everyone, thanks a lot for listening. Be well, be safe, and especially be prepared. Thanks a lot.